So also to our virtual participants, we will start in a second when I get the go from the technical team. Wonderful. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome from Vienna Alsergrund, from the IDM in Hahngasse. I have the pleasure to welcome you to our parliamentary election series, this time again to tackle Bulgaria. My name is Sebastian Schäfer. I'm the managing director of the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe, although I feel a little bit like Bill Murray in his Groundhog Day movie, where we come back again and again to talk about the Bulgarian elections. Nevertheless, it gives us an opportunity to bring back our good friends and gather together to talk about the political developments in Bulgaria. But before we do that, I hand over to Felix Ofner, the International Secretary of the Political Academy, one of our two cooperation partners. Felix, please.
Thank you, Sebastian. And a good morning from my side. Now, a bit of a tricky time to talk to all of you, but I will stay focused on the camera and turn to you as often as possible. Yes, as Political Academy, we try to be we are the educational center of our party. And in this role, we try to be an open space for discussion for topics that are maybe not covered in all-day politics. And this not only goes for domestic topics, not only for Austrian politics, but of course also for international topics. And therefore, we are very proud of this election series that we are very happy to partner in with, on the one side, the IDM. A special thanks there to Sebastian and of course Daniel, who put a lot of energy into organizing this series of events and always get us great speakers and great insights into the elections that are happening in the Danube region, which you can see behind us on the great map of the IDM. And on the other side, also a big thank you to the Karl-Renner-Institut, which is partnering as well with us in this cooperation. Big thank you especially to you, Gerhard. We think have a great cooperation, and we really appreciate it. We can work together here so well for, I don't know even how many years, but for a lot of years already. So yeah, thank you for the good cooperation. Talking about Bulgaria, as Sebastian has already mentioned, the situation, the fourth election, parliamentary election in 2 years, has on the one hand got us all together very often, which is great. But on the other hand, of course, we are looking forward to maybe a perspective that brings Bulgaria back to a stable government and also a stable political situation, especially as Austria has always had good ties with Bulgaria. Diplomatic connections between Austria and Bulgaria have been existing for 140 years. And Austria is the second largest investor in Bulgaria with more than, I think, 4 billion euros spendings of Austrian companies in Bulgaria. So I think there's a very good cooperation and friendship between Austria and Bulgaria. And therefore, of course, we are not only keen to hear insights on the situation in Bulgaria, and let me also give a big thank you to our panelists who will bring us these insights. But of course, there's also a big hope for us, and big interest for us that Bulgaria is getting out of political instability and is able to form a stable government again. However, it will develop. I'm keen to hear the perspectives. From what I heard until now, we are maybe not gotten so much closer to a stable government. But let's see what you have for insights for us. But nevertheless, big thank you. I'm very looking forward to this discussion, and I'm happy to hear your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felix. And before we start a round of technicalities, as always, the ones who are following our election series, you will have an input, a little briefing about the situation, and then we will go into 2 rounds of questions and then open up for you and give you the possibility to either post in the chat, post on YouTube, or raise your hand in the room. This is something that doesn't happen so often in the series in recent times. So we are very much looking forward to also include this. But without further ado, we heard a lot about our wonderful panel, and now I'm going to introduce it to you. I have, from my view, on my left-hand side, and I'm very happy that she's here, because although we have been cooperating for at least 4 or 5 years, you have never been actually to the premises of IDM. So Vladislava Gugalova, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Global Europe of the Globsec Policy Institute in Bratislava, very warm welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Then we have with us online Mimikola Zheva, who is the director of the Bulgarian-Romanian Inter-University Europe Center at the University of Ruse, and has also the Danube, as we have it in our backs flowing behind this institute, also not far away from her. Mimi, thank you for joining us online.
Thank you for inviting me.
And then we have the ones who have been following our latest 4 editions of this election series. We brought back one panelist from the very first time we tried it. So now, hopefully it's a good sign that in the fourth time is a lucky charm. In any case, he has been joining only online and now is joining us here in Vienna, which is a great pleasure. Yazin Georgiev, who is the executive director of the Economic Policy Institute in Sofia. Yazin, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And yes, now we of course would like to hear what the situation after the election looks like, and I would like to ask Vladi to give us a little bit of an overview what actually happened.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and I'm very delighted to be here indeed. First time in the office premises, so looking forward to the discussion and to the comments online and here on the premises. Now, maybe just to get back to a background a little bit. So we have been almost a year since the last elections in Bulgaria in November 2021. Since then, actually, there was a government set up, a coalition government managed to be set up led by a newcomer at the time. First-time participants in elections continued to change. It was from the beginning, I would evaluate as an unstable coalition with coalition partners coming from a broad spectrum of understanding how domestic and international politics, economy, finance, and other policy areas should be handled. And not surprisingly, it lasted about 6 months. And we know that there are such people, the name of one of the coalition partners withdrew their support based on several issues. One main, which was a priority for them from the beginning, was the policy towards North Macedonia and the relationship between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. Now, based on that, a caretaker government was set up, which is still in place by the president, which is according to the Bulgarian law, and not the first time by the president, the same president. Yet another caretaker government was put in place. On that, when we talk about the campaign, maybe a little bit, what we can see, in my opinion, is almost non-existent, actually, boring, shallow, matter of fact, I would even claim, from not taken as seriously by the politicians and by the candidates themselves, and predominantly being based in, concentrated in social media channels. This is not overly surprising because if you look at the data from one of the special Eurobarometers on media and news this spring that came out, we can see that actually, I have actually the numbers. Bulgarians receive their news more often from either online news platforms as well as social media and blogs platforms than EU average. And this is significant numbers of difference for the online news platforms is 60% versus 43 for the EU average. And for the social media is 47% versus 26. So we see that there is affinity among the Bulgarian citizens to get their information through these means. So it's not surprising that this campaign went through these channels. Main issues are not surprising either, as it is the situation in Europe at the moment. energy, inflation, cost of living, raising prices, the deteriorating socioeconomic state of the country and citizens, corruption also present. In my view, however, it was more of a polarizing claims being thrown out there rather than a deep discussion with substantive proposals. And of course, all of this in the context of a war which is the Russian war in Ukraine, which is quite close to Bulgaria. If we think about it, the Black Sea, it's right there, and here we are. One more note, maybe, if I may, on which I found interesting when thinking about campaign is the presence, actually the active visibility of the president, the caretaker government, and I would say the vice president, that actually they were in a sense targeted critical statements being made throughout, as well as a certain attempt for reversal of previous policies, such as attempt to regain dialogue with Gazprom, for example, which was different from the previous government's more assertive stance in refusing to pay with rubles, and we were actually among the first countries that the gas stopped coming to us from Russia. And then the vice president's statement in one of national events that she participated in, hinting that the EU should actually take the leadership and look for a compromise in the war. And this is something that it's hardly to imagine, for example, to be mentioned by any politician at the moment in the Baltics or Poland or even Slovakia and Czech Republic at the moment. So we are seeing here already a bit of a difference where the leadership and where the Bulgarian citizens stand. The results, very quickly on a factual base, the winner is GERB, which is the party of the former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov with 25%. Second, 5% behind them is Continue the Change, who were the newcomers in the previous elections. Third, Movement for Rights and Freedoms, usually supported by ethnic Turkish population and Muslim population. Fourth, important to mention, Revival. Let's not make a mistake. This is not the Emmanuel Macron's type of revival that it was just renamed recently with 10%. I'm mentioning the percentage on purpose here. Fifth is the Bulgarian Socialists with less than 10%, so the left. And then we have Democratic Bulgaria, 7%, Bulgarian Rise, a little bit over 4%. This is a newcomer as well. It was created the project, and then a party was created between two elections. Maybe just very quick few observations if I still have time.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So the first one, and I think this is a very serious matter. We are joking, of course, here in a bit sadness about this is the fourth election, and you know, we are starting to fill up the calendars of anybody that is following elections in Europe. But the turnout of these elections was 39%, and I know that maybe Mimi later will tell us a little bit about kind of election fatigue and the role of the youth. Which means that 60% of the eligible population to vote chose not to do so. Which means then that if you think about, if you make the simple math, even the winners, GER party with 25% are winning, but in reality, they're really supported with about 9% of the population. And this brings the question of representation, obviously. And further, to deepen this issue is that in our elections, there is another category in the list. Besides candidates and parties, you can also vote if you choose or check the box of do not support anybody. And 3.5% actually checked that box. Almost 90,000 people checked that box, which then, no, more than that, about 90,000. Math is not my strength. I'm looking to the camera. But what it means that if the threshold of entering the parliament is 4%, that means that the party of nobody almost entered the parliament. Of course, this is figurative speech, but it's really already pointing out to some deep issues in the Bulgarian society. Again, we're seeing 7 parties, so there's fragmentation. So apart from the apathy and maybe resignation of trying to find a representation among the candidates, there is also an increase of polarization, and this continues to be seen. I think that for former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, patience is being paid off, and we are seeing it right now. I also think that the previous government probably did him a favor with a arrest that later was seen as unlawful, and instead of dealing with the causes, they jumped into let's investigate quickly, but there were no proper mechanisms behind it. So that might have played a certain role. Back to revival. Revival is a very dangerous, actually, phenomenon. A populist, pro-Russian, anti-NATO, anti-European, anti-vaxxers, anti-anything that you can think of, disruptive, but very smart in the way how they managed to consolidate the votes of previous nationalist formations and parties who were coalition partners of GERB in the past, actually. While I think that they were able to harness the additional votes from some of the other more disruptive parties and movements that were created among the time of the street protests 2 years ago. And 10% is as a fourth power entering the parliament. Why I'm mentioning the left is in the deepest crisis in Bulgaria that I have ever been, with 9% voting for them. I think most of those votes are muscle memories of the core supporters, which will have to. This is within the socialists to figure it out what is the problem for them. And then maybe to mention two, if I may, more observations. The other is on the only party that during the campaign came out with a very strong statement about full-fledged support for Ukraine, moving ourselves away from this favorable Russian sentiments in a very strong sense, anti-Putin, I would say anti-Russia even statements. This is the Democratic Bulgaria. They gained 7%, so 10%. 10 is the out there, the extreme pro-Russian. This is the opposite, and 7%. It gives us already idea about also this polarization on the issue that it's staying. And then on the Bulgarian rise, it's an interesting case because the leader is a former defense minister who was first a minister in a caretaker government, and then for a short time became a minister at the last coalition government, who refused in early days of the invasion at the start of the war to define it as a war, but instead chose to use the exact Kremlin definition of the invasion and use the terminology. And so he also was able to gain seats in the parliament. One of the losing, I would say the losing parties is actually, there are such people who 2 elections ago actually won the elections. But I think that their disruptive way and puzzling even way of doing politics cost them. And in my opinion, they will fizzle out. And I would think that probably some of those votes actually were probably harnessed by revival, which is the more dangerous and unfortunate parts of this. I'll stop here. This was very long, I understand. Just a few facts and observations so we can go into depth now.
That was perfect, Vladi. Thank you very much. Exactly the time that we had actually allocated for it. And I think it was a very concise and defining summary. I have a short remark and then also a question regarding what you just said. I mean, with mentioning revival, it's a very young party compared. I think it has competed since 2017, something. And the interesting fact here is that they were always able to increase the number of votes that they would get in every election. Yeah? So, I mean, they participated now, of course, in a lot of elections due to the fact that they happen so often. But in the relative short period of time, you could see that they were able to always increase the number of votes. And with regards to what you mentioned, the electoral campaign being predominantly on social media and how much it is used, would you say that this is a reason in the sense that it's maybe cheaper and the electoral campaign possibilities are depleted of the parties, or is that really something that in general, as you mentioned, that there's far more affinity to use social media? Is that related to not trusting traditional media? And isn't that like a real danger in the sense of when we see how social media has been misused in the past to influence elections?
Yes, I think that it's the latter. It's not so much about the cheaper option in this case. It is about trust, and trust in many directions. So I think this is actually one of the main problems that we are seeing in Bulgaria, and this is the lack of trust. But the lack of trust, not only media, so media is one. There is a long-standing concerns that the media outlets are not objective, that they are intertwined with specific interests, either oligarchical interests or specific political interests, economic interests, what have you. So yes, so actually the media is struggling. There is also the concern of this reduced pluralism that is existing, and this is why I think some of the citizens have gone towards looking for news in the alternative or channels such as social media and online news platforms. But there is also another dimension to lack of trust, and that is the lack of trust overall of the government, towards the government. And this is actually, again, from a standard Eurobarometer this year, so summer this year, when talking about trust, 73% don't trust the government, 83% don't trust the parliament. I mean, these are significant numbers. And for a long time, and it stands still present, the highest trusted person is the president. This brings another question. I don't know if we're going to get today to it, about the floating idea of presidential republic. This is something that we may or may not discuss today. But yes, this then lack of trust of the institutions and the standards and the structures then pushes you away to look for alternative ways to find your news and find your information, then makes you therefore much more susceptible to malign foreign influences or domestic malign influences as well. And we can maybe mention that later if we get to a topic of Russian influence and policies towards Ukraine and Russia. So yeah, it's I think that the campaign was driven to that realm because yes, more people are getting their news there. And I think that they are there because there's a lack of trust in the structures and in mainstream media and institutions.
Thank you so much, Vladi. Mimi, the lack of trust in institutions, and I mean, you deal also especially with European integration, and there's a much higher trust in the European institutions. For Europe Day this year, you held a lecture and invited young Bulgarians to USA to learn about European integration and the European Union. And you are, of course, also in your capacity at the university in touch with the younger generation here. How does this constant voting affect the willingness of younger people to actually participate and inform themselves in these processes? And how do you deal with this resulting apathy in anything political, actually?
Thank you for this very important question, Sebastian. This is an issue that I've been concerned with since the beginning of our HERE program in European Studies. We started actually in 1993. And since then, we've been observing at the very beginning high levels of interest towards the program and the studies, and a little bit less in recent years. But what I would like to say is that this is probably one of the key issues that we should address in Bulgaria. And I would like to firstly start by saying that apart from this low voter turnout that we witnessed, we had 4% of people who chose the option in the poll stations, I do not give my support to any of the parties. So there was such an option. And this is very indicative because the 4%, this is the threshold to enter the parliament. So this means we have a group of people, quite a large one, that feels that has a very negative attitude to politics. So among those people, many young people as well. So we ask this question, why? And this is important. We have to know the root cause of the problem. And I will now refer to a survey which has been done by Alpha Research twice. This was a study on values of Bulgarians. And this is the first one has been done in 1999. This is the end of the 90s in Bulgaria, a very turbulent period. And the beginning of the second one was at the beginning of the millennium, 2003. What we saw there is what is most valued by Bulgarians was the family. Yeah, 84% of people said, we value the family. This is the most important for us. And what was the least valued was politics. About 5 to 8% said, yes, it's important for me. So what we see is this withdrawal from politics and political life, a sort of self-isolation in the private sphere. And then, as if once again, in the 90s, obviously at home is safe, outside is dangerous. If we try to remember the times of the beginning of the transition, we have to, of course, remember that the prime minister was killed, leaders of organized economic groups were murdered, banks bankrupted, privatization and loss of jobs, etc. So this period, this was the beginning, and it still continues to impact the way people think about politics. I had the chance to work closely with President Zhelev, the first democratically elected president in Bulgaria, and he said to me, within the transition, we succeeded in establishing democratic institutions, but we failed in the economic sector, he said. Probably there had been no prepared leadership in terms of economic at the time. If I contrast our situation to Poland, for example, I would have to say that the ministers of economics and finance in Poland from the very beginning had their education abroad at Western universities. So they started introducing market economy on the basis of studies, which are characteristic of real market economy states. In Bulgaria, this unfortunately was not the case. There was this mental map of trying to do economics the way we used to do it in communist times. So this is something that I believe could be considered a reason, very important. If we come back again to this idea of the family being most valued, then we may assume that for a political leader to be accepted somehow, to be trusted, eventually trusted, he or she should look like the strongest person of the family, the person who protects somehow, who provides safety. And I would like to state once again, this is well known, but this is exactly what Boyko Borisov, the leader of GERB, had realized very well. He has been on power for quite a time, 12 years and more. He adopted this style of being the father of the nation. He has been constructing for himself this image of a person who cares about all, who resolves the problems of all. And this is of no surprise that in this political party with the leader is back again as number one in the current elections. In a context that we have very complicated context of nearby war, energy crisis, inflation, So this is something that we have to be aware and know. And then if we talk about young people and how they look at the politics, now we have to mention also a very important aspect. So this is the issue of political socialization. We know that's well known from theory that young people usually are influenced in the formation of their attitudes inside society towards politics, influenced first of all by the family in their very young age. And what is the situation with families in Bulgaria? We have to consider this fact that many young people are under the influence of their grandmothers and grandfathers. The parents of those people left and they actually found their living and earning their living abroad. And those young people have been listening to the stories of their grandmas and their grandpas. This is the nostalgia of the old times somehow. And we know this problem, it is not only in Bulgaria, it's elsewhere as well. But I myself have found out within classes that many of those young people that come to study, they are not aware at all of communist times. They do not know recent history. They do not have idea of the negative perspective, critical perspective towards communist times. This is something that we address very much in classes and discuss to make this clear. Secondly, if you look at the next influence on young people comes by their education, schools, higher education, secondary level schools. And what I have to definitely say is that it was in 2020 when our educational system adopted studies in civil education, civic culture. Till then, there was no such a subject at universities. So the message or the most known phrase was politics is forbidden at schools. Politics being understood as a sort of an influence on young people, which political party they should be in favor of. It is, for us, and this is one of the most shocking aspects of the change that we needed very much in education, but it didn't happen. And it was 2 years ago that the students do have civic education. So they do not consider this important. They do not understand the impact of politics on their lives. And when we start discussing here, they really come to understand and they become much more interested in this. For example, now I have a student in the first year of studies, and he said, for me, politics is the most important knowledge that I have to acquire. I want to be a good citizen, and I want to be a good professional, and I want to contribute to change in Bulgaria. So this may be evolving, but it is a slow process and needs a lot of input on behalf of the state. I would like to mention also the impact of media on young people and very much social media. So my students say that when they affected by different communications, they are not interested in political messages. So that they're much more interested, for example, in computer security, in cybersecurity issues, other issues which they consider much more relevant for their lives. They live in this double environment. On one hand, they are constantly in their mobile phones, in their virtual reality. On the other hand, as if their normal reality becomes a little bit less. But what they have in their virtual reality is not politics, political issues, etc. And just to say something which is also very important, is about the political culture. So how is political culture being formed? We have to be very clear that in communist times, a specific political culture was imposed. You have to comply with the political line of the Communist Party. Any criticism is not tolerated, and this has become a sort of a mental map. It's somehow this kind of thinking is still there, and due to this, we do not have young people with participative political culture. This is something that we need to change, and we are trying to do this through involving our students in many activities, seminars, schools. This is something that we at least try to do, and we have, of course, positive results here. Maybe I would also, if you consider this important, I may just. Yeah.
We will come back further to this. I have a question to what you have mentioned with regards to the voter turnout. Maybe we should mention how it developed over these past 4 elections, and I would be interested also if there is research on it, if if it's the same amount of people that are participating, or if it fluctuates, especially with regards to the fact that then, as you mentioned, almost 4%, if they would form an against all party, they would almost make it into the parliament. But then there is also 60% who obviously can't even be bothered to vote against all because they are not participating at all. So how did that develop, maybe?
Well, for the first time, we have this 4% of people that have selected this option. I do not support any of the political parties. So obviously, this is an instrument of people to punish politicians, and just it has become more emotional. It is not only about disgust, but probably also about hate and hatred. And why people feel like this? Because they do not see the added value of politicians somehow. This does not affect positively their lives. And this has to be studied. I have not myself seen an analysis, especially of this issue. It needs to be researched, studied. What is also important here to say is that, as already has been commented upon, that we are more likely to support European Union institutions, to trust more European Union institutions than our national institutions. And this is, of course, true. This is very much the case that we expect that the European Union provides stability, that the European Union provides prosperity, and there's a lot of evidence for this. When it comes to national politics, what is in the public sphere is very much about scandals, about corruptive practices, about compromise that address different leaders of the political parties. And in elections, there is this blame game, constantly blaming the other participant in the elections. So this is what we have in the public space is much more negative than positive about how our policymakers do their jobs. Yeah, okay.
We'll come back in a second round, but now we bring Yazin also into the discussion, especially with regards to the trust in European institutions and how European integration shapes the overall politics in Bulgaria. But is this something that is brought up in the electoral campaign? Is that something where you would actually be able to gain votes? Because in most countries it's not the case. And then further to this, is there a discussion with regards to, I mean, if we compare, Bulgaria joined in 2007, they are trying to introduce the euro for quite some time. Croatia joined 6 years later, and they will introduce the euro on 1st of January. Is this something that was discussed in the electoral campaign? Is this something that plays a role, or is that completely out of it?
So there have been many things said that I would like to touch upon, but maybe I should start with the things that you have put on the table right now. So in fact, what Mimi and what Vadi did say is that Bulgarians tend to trust the European Union much more than Bulgarians trust Bulgarian authorities. But at the same time, looking at Eurobarometer, we can find out that for the last several years, the level of trust towards the European Commission and the European Parliament, or towards the EU as a whole, is declining. So 10 years ago, it was the prevailing majority of Bulgarians trusted the European Union. Now it is less, more than 50%, which is much more than national institutions, but still it is much lower than before, which comes to show that all the crises that we have been witnessing in the EU have impacted negatively the image of the European Union. Although the EU was able to survive the migrant crisis, the euro crisis more than 10 years ago. Most probably the EU is also going to survive the energy crisis. But the way things are shown on social media are as a failure. And this is why people tend to decrease their support or their trust towards the European Union. But you have to bear in mind that when it comes to trust, or the lack of trust, the issue started to emerge not in the 90s, not when we joined the EU, but I should say much earlier. And I can recall from my childhood when in 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster happened. At that time, my mother was pregnant with my brother, and we knew that something bad has happened. But all public institutions at that time were saying, please go in the parks, go enjoy the sun in May. Nothing special happened in Chernobyl. Everything is safe and sound. And what happened later on, that many kids, like my brother as well, were born with some diseases. And people started to say, maybe our government, at that time communist government, was not clear to us. They were hiding something. And later on, it turned out that the Communist Party at that time was pretty much aware about the implications, about the radioactive cloud that was spread all over Europe. They were having access to safe water, clean food, but the majority of people did not. So people at that time were very much aware that when it comes to government, they have to double question it. So even at that time, when we all used to be very, how to say, supportive towards the regime, people started to know that it is the government that is not always correct towards the citizens. I mean, the government is not doing the things in the right way for the people. And later on, because of the many favors, when Bulgaria started to the transition towards market economy, towards democracy, because of the many favors, people started to be very, how to say, suspicious when it comes to messages that come from public authorities. And nowadays, because of the social media, people are even more suspicious. And the lack of trust is to such high extent present that it is hardly possible for any government to make strategic decisions, because the society will be always divided. So let's go back to the euro, to the euro accession, to the accession of the euro area. It is one of the issues that is dividing the nation significantly. And if you go back to the Eurobarometer, you can see that 40% of the Bulgarians support the euro accession, 40% are totally against it, and you have some 20% that are neither supporting, neither rejecting. Which means that the government, which is about to implement the accession to the euro area, will suffer a lot, because no matter what decision will be taken, and almost half of the population will be pretty much not satisfied with the decision. And this brings me to the question whether the Europe as a whole and the euro area accession played a role in the campaign. The big parties actually, if you go to their political agenda, you can see that GERB, the second party, we're continuing the change. The Democratic Bulgaria, they're all saying they're supporting the euro currency. Even the Socialist Party says we are supporting it, but we have to implement careful research and to make preparation for it. So they think we have to be careful. Yes, we are for the euro area, but we don't have to rush for it. At the same time, the only party that was speaking more loudly about the issue is actually Revival. This party that is denying Europe, which is denying NATO, which is denying vaccines, which is denying everything. But in fact, if you go deeper, you can see that this party is also going to suffer from the same level of mistrust. Why? Because some investigations have shown that although the official statement of the political party Revival was and is still against vaccination, the majority of their member of parliament were vaccinated. They're against the euro area, but another investigation revealed that the majority of their parliamentarians have bank accounts in euro. Because when you're an elected official, you have to provide a statement about your bank account, your everything that you have, because you're a public figure. And some journalists find out that these guys that who are speaking against Europe, who are speaking against the euro area, they have bank accounts in euro, not in rubles, not in I don't know whatever currency, but in euro. So, and I think at the end, this party is also going to suffer from this double standard issue, because they are pretending to be anti-establishment, but at the same time, their main figures, I mean, their parliamentarians, are very much benefiting from the establishment. I just wanted to mention there's the issue of trust that is going to impact the euro area accession. In fact, according to the plan, Bulgaria is about to introduce the euro on the 1st of January 2024. But it seems that there's no information campaign. And the low level of trust towards the euro is also because of the fact that there has been no how to say, campaign to properly address the issue here. So no matter what is the official support of the political parties and even the support of GERB towards the euro, although they were in government for 12 years, they did not enough to present the added value of joining the euro area. They did not do enough to say that it is important for the country, because it is going to bring Bulgaria closer to the EU. From pragmatic point of view, it is quite important, I mean, the euro accession, because, as you know, in the 1997, Bulgaria had a huge economic crisis with hyperinflation reaching more than 250% on a monthly basis. And then Bulgaria asked the International Monetary Fund to come and to stabilize the public finances. As a result, Bulgaria introduced the so-called currency board regulation, which means that nowadays the Bulgarian currency is still pegged to the euro. Initially, it was pegged with a fixed exchange rate to the Deutsche Mark, to the German mark, and when the euro was introduced, automatically the Bulgarian currency was pegged to the euro, which means that even today, Bulgaria is de facto a member of the euro area. We have a fixed exchange rate, so we are taking all the decisions coming from Frankfurt without having a seat on the table. So from that perspective, it is quite logical that we become member of the euro area. We are already there de facto, and more than 55% of Bulgarian export goes to euro area countries. We are trading with Germany, with Austria, with Italy. So from that perspective, it makes sense. But no political party has ever communicated this broadly enough. I would like also to mention the economy as one of the issues that was mentioned during the campaign. It is quite clear that inflation and rising energy prices played a role. But in fact, I should say that the position before these elections, I mean, GERB and the other parties, they tried to explain that this inflation is because of the last government. Although we all know that inflation and energy prices are something that is not depending on Bulgaria per se, because it is a global European process of increasing energy prices, of increasing inflation because of food insecurity, because of other issues. But it was displayed as a domestic issue. And of course, if people think that it's a domestic issue, they're going to punish the previous government. And young people, I cannot refrain from touching this issue that Professor Karl-Renner mentioned. Why? Because many young people tend to take or to accept the EU as a granted issue. And what we did this summer with a group of students in Bulgaria, we brought them to the border with Greece. And we decided to speak about the current European agenda and what are the implications on Bulgaria and how Bulgaria participates in the debates on the EU level. But before that, it was like a seminar in the city of Sandansky. Professor Karl-Renner knows this format very well because we have been organizing it for more than 10 years now, and Professor Karl-Renner attended it and contributed to it several times. But this time, we decided not only to focus on the discussion in the hall, but we prepared a field exercise or fact-finding mission for the young people. And we asked them to go in the city and to ask local people how they used to travel to Greece before 2007. And these young people at the age of 20 or 20-something were so much surprised that local people had to travel to Sofia, like 250 kilometers to the mainland, to apply for a visa, then go back to Sandansky, then go back to Sofia to take the visa, and then to go to Greece. So they were saying, oh, there were visas, there were passports. Yes, we said, yes, but they said, but we have always been living in an open Europe. I said, okay, 15 years ago, it wasn't the case. I mean, please speak to your parents about this. But the fact is, as already mentioned, that the parents are either preoccupied with any other issues, or the parents are working abroad in the European Union. And some of these kids are raised by their grandparents, and the grandparents have this romantic picture of the communist time. Why? Because at that time they were young. Of course, I mean, when a person is young, he's always recalling this time with a nostalgia, not only because of the regime, but also because of the fact that at the time he married, got kids, etc. But these people, I mean, the elderly people, they have this romantic vision about communism because at that time, all the jobs were secured, all the education possibilities and healthcare services were actually public, paid by the state. And many of these people are quite puzzled these days because almost 30 years after the transition, they are still used to this way of living with having the government taking care of everything. So for this reason, and for the reason of, I mean, the fact that they were at that time, they have some romantic picture, and this picture is now conveyed to younger generations. This is why we have, as NGOs, think tanks, universities, political parties, we have to speak to young people in order to tell them that what we have is not here like a gift. It is not granted, and we have to fight every day in order to keep this European orientation of the country. Otherwise, I mean, this misinformation is going to spread even further. So I think at this point I should make a break, and I'll be able to continue later on.
Thank you very much. We will, because there's already questions coming in, but I will do a quick return round through Mimi and then to Vladi, because now that the issue of borders and visas has come up, I just need to ask Mimi, of course, because I mean she lives directly at another border with Romania, and is actually also facing, I mean, still quite some challenges even within the university program when it comes to the free movement in Europe. Mimi, do you want to tell us a little bit more about this very briefly, so that we can then also open up to questions for the audience?
Yeah, so this is an interesting issue, because we have had different thinking about borders in communist times, first of all, and there is a change now, but let me just remind the situation in former years. Firstly, borders were very much militarized within the Cold War, and they were protected by military staff. So it was not expected that people often cross the borders. When the situation changed and we took this turn towards European foreign policy orientation with the idea of acceding to the European Union, then the attitude has been a little bit, started to change a little bit. And I just have to tell you from my own experience that when we started developing our project, Bulgarian-Romanian Creation, Bulgarian-Romanian Center for Master Programs, we had to cross the border almost every day. And as Ruse, the city of Ruse is about 14 kilometers away from Giurgiu, the city just across the river, the bridge and the border. And we were supposed to pay about $47 per day just to leave Bulgaria, then go to the Romanian side and then be back. So this was the first shock that we had to overcome. Why was this situation? Because immediately when the situation changed, the border was treated as a sort of a business area. Different profits had been started to be made, and a lot of services that were offered were actually obligatory for the people that have been commuting or crossing the border. So that was, you know, first idea of ours, that this is something that needs change, and we developed a project in 2007. It was approved in 2007, and we started to educate servants at the border. Now the situation also had been changed, because the new service was installed in the border. There were no military anymore, but national police authorities. But they were completely unaware of what Schengen is, of what European Union is. And we did this experiment to bring together servants from the two sides of the border, Romanians and Bulgarians, and to deliver classes to them related to European integration, very much to the issue of cross-border cooperation. They have no idea at all that within internal borders of the European Union, and there is this normal way of living, of crossing the border every day and even having a job across the border. And this project was, there was a huge interest towards the project. Even we were asked to raise the number of participants there. They also were given the chance to learn the neighbor language within this program. And so we were also delivering this idea of a culture of cooperation, because there was no trust at all in the former times. And it was unthinkable for those people that they may share some information. The situation changed with the time, and now the system has been building upon a specific structure that was created, a common body of police servants from Bulgaria and from Romania, working in a common space and dealing with information related to the border. But what is also interesting about our case is that this is absolutely unique, this border of Bulgaria, because north-south, it is internal border of the EU member states, like Bulgaria and Romania. But east-west, it is an external border of the European Union, because you have along the Danube, you have Ukraine, Bulgaria, Romania, then you have Serbia. So there is a need for a specific attitude to the way this border is to be governed. A very complicated case, actually. What we also were doing is that we have been bringing our students to meet people working at the border, to discuss their main policy issues, and to build upon their experience of how the border people are prepared to enter Schengen and to be part of Schengen. Now I have to say, with the time, it's so many years since then, the border police already has adapted to work in the framework of Schengen, meeting Schengen standards, providing information for Schengen. I have to say, yes, Bulgaria and Romania are already well prepared for becoming members. As you know, yesterday we have had this debate at the European Parliament on this very important question, if Bulgaria and Romania could be accepted to join the Schengen agreement. And I think in this aspect, European Union was a little bit, is a little bit late even, and that has had to happen earlier, because it could have been a very important impulse for us, that we are becoming part of the real core of the European Union. We are not a periphery. This is also what Yasen has been talking about, that there's less trust nowadays in the European Union. So we hope and we believe that Bulgaria and Romania will become part of Schengen soon. It's very, very important, and there are, of course, there are some issues related to corruption, etc. But once becoming a member of Schengen, you have the option to rely upon Frontex. This is the agency of the European Union that deals with external borders, and they provide personnel there, staff, for controlling the situation in the border. So there should be not that much reserve for Bulgaria as a relevant candidate for Schengen, for becoming part of Schengen. So that's, yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. So get ready to ask questions. If there are any, please indicate. From my side to Vladi, and also I'm going to start picking up things that are coming in through the chat. The question again with the role of media, I think we touched upon it already. The question is how newspapers, do they still exist? Are they still relevant? Is the TV, radio partially owned by oligarchs? But what is also asked in the question from Klaus Brempost is, has there been a difference between the countryside and the big cities in the election? Was that something that was relevant? Did you look into this?
When it comes to media or reaction?
No, when it
in
comes
general,
to the election, I would say is the question.
A little bit, maybe I would not be probably the right authority in detail to answer. On the media, though, on the question about printed press, yeah, actually, the trust in printed press or the use, the trust in printed press by Bulgarians is 18% versus average EU 39%. This is streaming again back to this concern of consolidation of ownership of the printed media specifically. On the countryside versus the bigger cities, the movement for rights and freedom had their usual areas where they are where their support is concentrated. The second party continuing the change, I believe, won only in two, and I'm sorry if I'm mistaken, I think only in 2 or 3 districts within the capital. All of the rest was won by GERB, if I am not mistaken. Again, I am just kind of trying to imagine now the colorful map in my head. So this is how it was. It wasn't very colorful. The colorful map wasn't very colorful. So this is the extent that I would be able to answer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So, do we have questions in the room to be asked? Yeah. A couple of them. Yes. Then please. Yeah.
Yeah. Ladislava, you mentioned already the weakness of the left, of the Socialist Party. Could you or the other panelists elaborate more on this? Why this, where this weakness comes from, and what's the image of the Socialist Party now in Bulgaria? Maybe a second question, if I may, what's the influence of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church in the country, or also when it comes to the war in Ukraine and how it is perceived?
And if I add to this from the chat, because there's the question if the pro-Russian attitude of the president has an impact on the election.
I will refer the Orthodox Church question and maybe the Socialist Party to the other experts, but maybe touching upon a little bit on the general pro-Russian attitudes, I would say, on the influence of Russia in Bulgaria. Yes, I think that on the whole, the president, with his visibility during the campaign, is influencing. His statements have been, in my opinion, somewhat controversial at times, because he's the most trusted person as well, or institution, and himself. He was re-elected with a large margin last year. I would cautiously agree that yes, there was an influence from he had influence in some way, some of the votes in the election. I think that he's not the only one. In general, the Bulgaria is a fruitful place for Russia's influence on many fronts. On the one hand, there is the presence of the large Russian community. There is a large number of employees in the Russian embassy. The previous government just expelled 70. I mean, Bulgaria is a small country, and expelling 70 and still not put a dent on the embassy is telling that there's quite a few. There is this deep sense of cultural, brotherly connection that still exists. This is mixed with some kind of a historical gratitude that we have been taught at school, and somewhat the Bulgarian citizens feel. And then you have the younger generation that is susceptible to this skillful propaganda. And so this skillful propaganda through the channels mentioned already is not openly pro-Russian, but it's anti-Western, anti-American, anti-vaccination. So it's a skillful level that it's being used, and we are quite susceptible. And maybe in that connection, if I may, in our GlobSec trends, so this is what we produce every year, and we monitor Central and Eastern European countries. This year, Bulgaria, through the numbers, shown that it's the least pro-Western country in the region. Just some numbers that I pulled out from there: 38% wish to exit NATO. 58% from the poll citizens, 58% don't see Russia as a security threat. 30% still consider Russia as the most important strategic partner. Vulnerability to conspiracy theory, 54% believed on average 3 conspiracy narratives that were presented to them, 54%. So based on this, I think that Bulgaria is susceptible to such influence. And I think that, yes, through some of the trusted institutions and figures that are currently, such as the president, for example, this is also an opportune moment for such influence as well. So yeah, for sure, I would claim that influence was part of the election results, one way or another.
Thank you. So, Mimi or Yasin, any comments on the Orthodox Church and the Socialist Party?
If I may just, Mimi, please go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Just shortly, I would say that young people that I work with, they do not identify themselves as Christians. The influence, the impact of the religion, of the church, is not strong. And again, the question is, why is this the case? Probably due again to the influence of the family. As it is well known, the Christian identity was forbidden in communist times, not allowed to visit the church, and the grandma and grandpa didn't do it. So this is something important. And the role of the religion is in Orthodox especially is not identified as the one that protects those that are in need. Our church does not give enough signals that it helps people that are in need, and this is somehow contrasted to the Catholic Church, and this makes sense about perceptions of the impact of religion. Yeah, probably that's shortly a comment.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to follow up another question that was also asked. If do you have numbers how actually the youth vote? Is there something different in the general election outcome? Did they vote predominantly for other parties than GAP, or we continue to change, or did they just fall into the same pattern?
From my discussions with students, because we analyzed elections and results, I come to the conclusion that they mostly favored continuing change and GERB. My students are Europe-minded anyway, but this is important, and we have been also commenting on why continuing change is not the winner of those elections as well. And we come up to the following overall conclusion. So students accept the idea that setting the goals for reforms and change, this has been a success for this political party. This has been a success story, more or less. But there is the issue of managing the process of change, the instruments. How do you come up with achieving those goals that you have in mind? And this is very often the case in politics, that there are parties that have very good goals, but they just cannot meet them. And here, our analysis and the analysis of the young people was that the very process of managing change was not successful, and because of lacking communication, and because of this politics of exclusion rather than inclusion. So somehow the leaders of continuing change have been saying, oh, this party, this is corrupted. Oh, here about this party, we also have this sort of generalization of the issue of corruption and labeling the parties of the previous government this way. So this generalization does not work well, because if you make objective analysis of the input of the different political parties, you will find out that they have contributed with the time for the positive developments in Bulgaria, especially if you take the case of the first mandate of GERB, the political party, etc. So this is what they just don't like, this idea of generalizing the issue of corruption. And secondly, there was sort of a lack of communication on change. So this is by theory, if you want to manage change, you need to communicate a lot. And this is a weakness of our society. We lack communication practices. We lack societal dialogue on policies. And why is this so? I may also say that maybe due to to legacy of communist times. The communication in those times was one-way communication, top-down communication, and everybody was supposed to just to accept the directive and follow it. But in a democracy, you have to base your policy making on societal debates, consultation, analysis, etc. So this is my comment on this question. Thank you.
So, Yasin, both still, if you want to chip in on the Church or the Socialist Party.
In fact, in a nutshell, so the Socialist Party is registering these low results because of many facts. But in their essence, I could only summarize several of them. Firstly, there's some wealthy businessmen within the party. And so if you think about the Socialist Party and you're having some members that are pretty wealthy because of private business, for their voters, it's a bit strange to have like millionaires at the same time people speaking about social policy or something like this. The other thing is that the Socialist Party was the party that introduced the flat tax rate several years, more than 10 years ago. So can you imagine a 10% flat tax rate on personal income and on corporate profits? And this is a Socialist Party. So it's not very, how to say, social to have the same taxation on let's say, on poor people and wealthy people. So from that perspective, I should say that when it comes to ideology, they fail to when they talk, they don't walk the walk. And this is why people tend not to believe the Socialist Party. But of course, in the previous decades, they were responsible for the huge crisis in the 90s when I mentioned. And people still do have these memories of a country that was almost at the brink of bankruptcy because of, at that time, the government of the Socialist Party. On the Orthodox issue, I would like to say that I recently read several studies on the level of trust of people towards the Orthodox Church. And it seems that although people are not very religious in Bulgaria, it is not like in Greece, not like maybe in Romania, but at the same time, these studies show that the majority of Bulgarians tend to trust the Orthodox Church because it played a huge role at the time when Bulgaria was under the Ottoman rule. It was the institution, or the only one institution when Bulgaria was not was part of the Ottoman Empire that was able to preserve the language, the religion, and the beliefs. And this is why people have high level of trust towards the church as an institution. And because of that, I think that the Orthodox Church might be used, or it has been used, to channel Russian influence towards the country. Because if we assume that people tend to trust the church, the Orthodox Church, and if it is used for, let's say, conveying messages for Slavic unity, Slavic brotherhood, this is the way the Russian propaganda can go closer to the local society. So, from that perspective, I do think that the Orthodox Church plays a role, especially as a channel to influence voters, not so much actively, but it is there, and we have to consider its importance. When it comes to the war, of course, there were some messages coming from the patriarch, from the head of the Orthodox Church, who blamed Russia for this war between two Slavic brothers or something like this. But we have to bear in mind that in the previous years, the Orthodox Church organized several big events and welcomed the Russian Patriarch to come to Bulgaria and to visit some places, which is a bit, I should say, not quite needed, but still it conveys a message that the Orthodox Church is somehow more favorable towards the Russian Orthodox Church. But as we know it, the Russian Orthodox Church is one of the pillars of conveying the message of the Russian peace or the Russian world, Ruski Mir. So from that perspective, I think these relations might play an increasingly important role in the future.
Brief follow-up question from the chat asked by Gudrun Steinacker. Did the support of the European People's Party help GERB? Do you think that this had an influence?
The European People's Party, definitely. GERB is a member of the European People's Party and the head of the European European People's Party was in Bulgaria right before the elections. But I don't believe that this membership in the European political family plays such a big role for GERB. Of course, on the surface, it is a party that is a strong member of the European People's Party. They are pro-European, pro-NATO, but please bear in mind that during the last government of Borisov, Bulgaria built the extension of Turkish Stream over the Bulgarian border, bringing Russian gas from Turkey to Serbia and then from Hungary. So in this way, Bulgaria's government at that time contributed in a way that Ukraine is not so important for Russian gas deliveries in Europe, because during the government of Borisov, Bulgaria prepaid with own funds this extension without having any channels to get gas from this. It is a transit tube that goes from Turkey to Serbia. And GERB always used to say that it is going to increase the gas diversification of Bulgaria. But at the same time, there's no extensions of this tube towards the local gas transmission network, which means that this project is serving everything else but the Bulgarian interests. So I'm quite puzzled to say that they're quite European, because at the same time they did something that's not in line with the European values and the European strategies to keep the EU unified and not to increase the vulnerability towards Russia.
Well, I mean, this is a whole other topic, I guess.
Yes, for another discussion.
Because it's not exclusive to Bulgaria, I would say.
So we have to say that, I mean, no matter which political party is in power, we have to bear in mind that under the surface, we have this strong pro-Russian influence. Yeah. And on the surface, the majority of political parties, even these parties that are now in parliament or going to be in parliament, the majority of them are pro-European, but when it comes to some decisions, they tend to be not so European, I should say. So we have to be really careful when evaluate this. And from that perspective, I think that the European partners of, let's say, of all the other parties should be more careful in disseminating the message that these political parties have not only to talk the talk, but walk the walk when it comes to European values.
Right. Thank you.
May I?
Absolutely. I would suggest we have, because we're approaching fast the end of this discussion, that we use the opportunity for a last round, and you bring all the things in that you want to add to this. But I would also ask an additional question with regards to how is it going to look like? Are we going to meet in a couple of months again? Or will we actually see a government? Will we see a change in the political system that you hinted a little bit? Will we actually see something? So in this last round, and we would start with Vladi again, react to what you want to react, but also give us an outlook into the future, please.
Thank you. Yes, of course. And that connects well what I wanted to interact with the commentary. Yes, and so yes, as a prediction, I think that it will depend on a desire to, on one hand, to be in power, because it's very enticing. Right now, we're in consultations, or we're going to start consultation. Do those political parties entering the parliament, is power going to be an important motivator? Or would it be another motivator important, and that will be the desire for stability? Because we're already seeing that there is this war of attrition. We're already seeing, in a sense, certain winners to be floating above, because simply the society is resignating, and then winter is coming. After winter, we're having further not very rosy outlook of the situation, not only in Bulgaria, in Europe, globally, most likely as well. And so would that be a motivator to create a coalition government? Could be. So these are two possible motivators or determinants. What would that mean, however, will be to pay a price. And that price will be kind of the end of the attempt to change the governance structures from within, to clear them up, to deal with the entrenched corruption and not working judiciary. So we agree, okay, let's have a coalition government. Let's have some stability to be moving towards making sure that the country, it's not starting to move into a spiral down. But would that mean that if we're having this coalition government, presumably, let's say, led by GERB, I think automatically that means kind of the end of the attempt currently of this major change, governance structures change. Something that it's interesting, and this is what is happening right now, I found interesting, is this coalition rounds through mediators. So GERB, as a winner, decided not to kind of go directly in consultations with the other parties, but they are using a very creative way to entice two well-known figures in Bulgaria. One is a former president of Bulgaria, Rosen Plevneliev, who have been part of GERB's governments in the past. He was supported by GERB during his presidency, but he has been kind of on the side for some time, has not been so close, tied into the party. And then the second one is well known by you, Solomon Pasi, who actually was a discussant last time during the elections debate here, as well, very well known figure, pro-transatlantist, pro-European, pro-NATO. So that's a skillful way kind of to move towards the idea, okay, government needs to be, it's time to have a coalition government. And it's not just GERB, it's not about GERB and all of the baggage coming with what Yasen talked a little bit about, but it's also about stability, winter is coming, And then more interestingly, there are 3 points that were brought out, that these red lines kind of drawn to decide who should be, if possible, or interested in this coalition government. First point, I'm citing exactly here, it's for or against Putin. This is how it was put by Boyko Boris. Are you for or you are against Putin? Second point, inflation, economy, rising of prices, standard cost of living, dealing with that towards the goal of entering the Eurozone. So this was mentioned exclusively. And third, energy diversification, which just Yasin pointed out. It's interesting to consider the baggage of GERB, the baggage of other governments as well. And that's consensus that used to exist that, yes, when we are pro-European, we are pro-NATO, pro-Western, but when it comes to cultural matters and when it comes to energy matters, we're happy to cooperate and be as close as we can to Russia. And so now this is an interesting change, a little bit of events, and to see if that dynamic will pick up some steam. And last, if I know that it's a few extra minutes, to pick up something that Mimi said about the family, the father of the nation, the family man, based on the values, the family is more important. I would say it's the syndrome of the Messiah that very often we have here in Bulgaria through our elections. Usually we look for a male, not a woman. Women are, by the way, underrepresented, just in mentioning to pass here in elections. But what we're saying in election results as far as women in the parliament and as participants in the government. But it's a male usually, either to be strong standing, strong leader, either visually looking or speaking very, very strongly and stable, or new, or somebody without a baggage. And we have a lot of examples. We have our king in exile, Simeon Saxe-Bobrokowski, who became in no time prime minister without necessarily being part of the political system ever. Still was relearning the use of Bulgarian as he became prime minister. Then we had Boyko Borisov, and Mimi already spoke a lot about his figure. And then we had just now during the last government, Kirill Petkov, who was absolutely new, right? New, and we just feel always that this new person or this strong person will come and will save the day, which is a little bit worrisome. But this brings us to the idea of, is that meaning that maybe we would be willing to have a presidential republic because the most trusted person is our current president? I don't think so, because we would like to have this strong prime minister and leader. But when you have a president, it feels, kind of a pyramid, although it's not the case, but in the mind of people, here is the president on top. Is that an unchecked person? And that I think will remind us too much about what Mimi referred about this sentiment, as well as Yasin, of communist regimes, that this will be this one person that we cannot check in and cannot topple. It's not the case in reality and by law, but I think in the conscience of citizens that may be the red line, that probably that is not something plausible. So these are my few remarks.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, for these insights. Very interesting. Mimi, what will the future look like?
According to me, there is one key issue for a possible coalition, and this is eventual agreement on the reform of the system of justice. We have to clearly state that Bulgaria is vulnerable in terms of lack of reforms in these sectors. When we've been negotiating our membership to the European Union, there is this chapter 24 on justice and home affairs, and it was found out that there had been no reforms in the sectors. The constitution and the laws have not been adapted to the needs for change in terms of adhering to democracy, in terms of introducing democratic approaches, principles, rules, and norms, especially as far as the sector of prosecution is concerned. So here we have to try to resolve this problem of ours. The European Union did so via the establishment of mechanism of cooperation and verification. That's regular annual monitoring on behalf of the Commission on the progress that we made. Unfortunately, this has delivered almost nothing. So this is what our society needs most, and this should be the core of the debate. Then the other issue is our pro-Putin or pro-Western orientation. Here, I would like to say that somehow leaders of political parties in Bulgaria have been trying to play the game both, to meet some expectations for influence on behalf of the regime of Vladimir Putin, and be very much loyal also on paper and also in practice to our European Union membership. This is this sort of double, game is now over, and because of the last developments, we clearly saw who is where. Obviously, the president is trying to still play this game of sort of a double loyalty, but times have shown us that this won't be possible and should not be possible anymore. So these are the key issues, and let us hope that this issue these points could come to could actually catalyze processes of compromise, because there is a need for compromise, and this is the only way that democracy actually works. Actually, these parties represent people, societal groups, and those societal groups have their expectations for government. If this will not happen, then we will go for the next round of elections. But I will look at this from a positive perspective. This is a chance, an opportunity for the people to learn about democracy, because there had been no knowledge about democracy inside the society, very much, including the young people. So we should not be afraid of elections. Let us have more chances to learn. Thank you.
There would have been actually, a very positive end of this discussion. So the burden is on you now to keep the positive outlook. Yes,
I do realize it. Maybe I should just thank the audience. But I would like to come up with two scenarios for the future. The first one is that GERB, we continue the change, and democratic Bulgaria sit together and build a government, because of the fact that at least according to their agendas, they are pro-NATO, pro-European Union, anti-Russia, anti-Putin, not anti-Russia, anti-Putin, anti-war. They all, at least on the surface, are in favor of the Euro accession. So from that perspective, it makes sense that these three parties build a coalition government. But this might mean the political end of we continue the change and democratic Bulgaria. Why? Because they are basing their agendas on changing the model of justice, the model of democracy that has been implemented by GERB. So if they decide to accept the invitation by GERB to form a government, it means that this party are likely to lose support in the upcoming elections. But on the other hand side, it's quite important that they consider this invitation in order to keep the direction of the country towards the European Union. So they're quite, I mean, in a not a very favorable position, whether to act as a statesman, to put all the difficult issues aside and to focus on the things that they could do in the future, or to be true to their values and say, no, we cannot accept your invitation because you did that, this, and this. So this scenario about the coalition government, I think is less likely to happen, despite the efforts of GERB to find a common ground for coalition. And the second scenario, of course, which I think is a bit more highly likely to happen, is to have a new round of elections. But of course, you never know. It is about politics. about finding the balance, finding the making compromises. But what is quite sure, I mean, we can practice democracy, as Ms. Kornajeva mentioned, at the latest next year in October, when we have local elections. But before that, it might be the case that we are going to practice parliamentary elections again because of this uncertain situation. In the meantime, what is clear is, without a crystal ball, is that the role of the president will be very important. Because he's the person who appoints the caretaker governments, who decides over the members of this caretaker government, and as long as we don't have any elected parliament with any stable government, it will be the president who will be responsible for making doing the real decisions. And we have to bear in mind that. Although he is US trained Air Force commander, his first application or candidacy to be president was backed by the Socialist Party. And before he was elected for the second term, there was a debate. And when he was asked to whom does Crimea belong, he mentioned Russia. Then he said, de facto now, it was before the war. So we have to bear in mind that he's very much looking towards Moscow, although he's yes, US trained Air Force general, and he speaks English very well, and he's saying that Bulgaria should stick to NATO and EU, but at the same time, you have to bear in mind that he has the tendency to lean towards Russia. So far from me, two scenarios, one highly likely, one less likely, but what is sure, the president will be important in this situation.
Thank you very much to each and everyone who participated online in the seminar room here or watch us on our YouTube channel, but especially, of course, to my three wonderful panelists, Vladi, Mimi, and Yazan, for these insights. I want to end with this, whatever happens, democracy can be practiced, and we see further implementation of democracy at work, regardless of what is going to happen, not only because then I can invite you again and have another discussion, but I think that ultimately in such a situation, we should continue to believe in these processes and hope for the best outcome, maybe even achieved through this mediation process. So thank you very much for coming to Vienna. Thank you very much, Mimi, for joining online. See you very, very soon, hopefully in other occasions before we need to talk about elections again. Take care, and thank you very much, of course, also to our two cooperation partners in the overall series, the Political Academy and the Karl-Renner-Institut, for continuing to accompany the parliamentary elections in the target region of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.